now streaming live on YouTube. How exciting. So my name is Damien Duchamp, and I'm going to be facilitating the interview today. Before we get into the introduction, here with Founders Friday, the goal is to be tactical. The assumption is that if people really want to learn about the stuff that's already out there, there's plenty of articles. I was certainly reading them, going through your LinkedIn profile. There's some good information there. Definitely check out the company as well. But the goal is to be tactical. The collective within Founders Friday are primarily founders or on their way to being founders. And so we want to be tactical. We want to ask questions that can help in the growth of our different projects and initiatives. And with that, we always like to thank Kettle Space, even though we're virtual. When we are in person, they give us a place to gather, which is important. And with that, I will do the introduction. So with us today is Matias, Recchia. Recchia, is that okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Great. Co-founder and CEO of Iguanafix. And I'm an academic, so I like this. Entrepreneur in residence at Harvard Business School. So welcome to Founders Friday.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. And so Iguanafix is an online marketplace for home improvement and car repair services. Is that still an appropriate description?
That's an appropriate description. Something that we've done in the last couple of years that we haven't talked too much about is that we've become more of a B2B solution for companies trying to manage better their remote workforce, which I'm sure we'll get to when we talk about customer acquisition. But we haven't fully pivoted, but we kind of like run now a B2B services company, basically for large customers that want to manage an independent network of technicians in different categories. And then we also have a B2C offering for homes throughout Latin America. Fantastic.
And I'm familiar because I use some of these types of services here in Pennsylvania. But one of the things that I gathered from one of the articles, which I think is probably on the minds of some of the founders, is this issue of vetting and doing background checks for people that you work with, because we've heard all the bad stories, whether it's Uber or TaskRabbit or whoever it is. Can you share some learnings that you've had in that process?
Yeah, I think when you run a services marketplace, or whenever your final service is delivered by a third party, you have to be obsessive about background check, because you're only as good as the last person that went to someone's house to perform a service. And that's super important to remember constantly. Just like, it doesn't matter if you have the best technology in the world, the best pricing in the world, the lowest cost of customer acquisition. If the service is not great, no one's going to use your service again. It's like, if it's people going to people's houses, it may end up with a lawsuit. So I think it's important not to take this ever lightly. What we do is we start the process online, but we always finish the process in person. It doesn't mean that the process in person needs to be too long, but we do want to meet people in person. For the first 1,000 providers, we took all of their pictures ourselves, because we want to create a standard of, just like, how are you supposed to dress for these pictures? And it's not just a selfie, and it's not the picture that you will put in your Facebook account. So from things such as so basic as to having the picture, to just running tests on people, personality tests, and you'll be surprised to see how many people fail a test, which just basically is trying to assess whether, if you had the opportunity to steal from someone, you will do it. So there are personality tests out there that are very helpful. We ask them for personal references, which, again, you can lie in many of these things, but if you put enough filters, it makes it cumbersome enough that if you're planning to do something bad, this is not the ideal platform for you. So I think you need to get to an equilibrium of making it streamlined enough so that it's easy, and people are busy. So if you make it impossible for them to sign into your service, they're not going to use it. But at the same time, you should make it a little bit hard so that people that go through the hurdles are people that are actually interested in participating in the marketplace, and they're serious people that can complete a proper application and pass through several filters. The next thing we do now, which we didn't do when we started, and I think it's super important, is in particular if you're getting started or you're a small companies, just have a network of trusted people that can provide, to which you can provide services for free maybe, and just test these providers for 1 or 2 services. Just like, don't just send them to a random customer that has never hired a service with you. Just test them with people that will provide candid feedback, and just let the providers know that for the first 5 to 15 jobs, depending on how big your platform is, they're kind of like, it's testing ground. So if they don't get 5 stars, they're just not going to be able to be in the platform. And I think that is another point, which is more and more, I think the opportunities in curated and managed marketplaces, not in just a listing of like random people that you can hire. Just, I think correct list is already there, and it has a function, and we'll see what happens with it in the future. But really, if you want to create a great company, you need to make sure that you curate your supply.
Awesome. You mentioned the potential for lawsuits. How do you, beyond what you just shared, are there any other things that you would suggest in terms of protecting yourself against liability in this kind of a marketplace?
I would say, one, it's good to spend money. If you know you're going to do it and you've raised a little bit of money and you can afford it, it is a good idea to hire good lawyers that have gone through this before. Make sure that your terms or conditions are representative of what the service does. I think it's important to tell customers, we tell them what's included in the service and what's not included in the service, which is very important. And we see our service providers as partners in our business, but we're also very clear with them. Our mobile app has geolocation. They have to check in when they get to a service, check out when they leave the service. So, just like, it's not a threat, but we know where they were, at what time they check in, at what time they checked out, and they cannot take jobs in our platform if they turn off geolocation. So it's a way of telling our customers, just like, we're tracking people, and it's also a way of telling the technicians in our network, kind of like, hey, this is important, and we'll definitely take action if something goes wrong. So it's like, you want to protect yourself, but you also want to make sure that you're protecting your customers, and treating that protection to your customers with the same seriousness that you're kind of like taking the protection of your own company.
Right. You mentioned before that the company has changed a little bit and expanded in terms of B2B, and I saw that you were working with companies like Starbucks and Anheuser-Busch and Bev. Are those expectations in terms of the people that are being provided in that marketplace, do those expectations grow when you're dealing with those types of companies?
For sure. So kind of like, what we do generally is that for service providers to be able to take a B2B job, we have a tagging system in our backend. So basically, if you've had less than 1,000 jobs, you cannot take a corporate request. And that's important for 2 reasons. One is there's very little room for error in those companies, because maybe you're servicing a retail space that has customers from 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. So you actually need to do a job at 7 a.m. and 7 or 7:30. It's not the same thing, because you need to be out by 8 a.m. So we want the providers that we know are constantly punctual. We know the providers that have, just like solved services like this on a number of occasions before. And what we started doing a year and a half ago is also, for some of these services, we provide in advance training. So kind of like, if you're fixing stuff in places that we already look how they look like, and we already know what the main issues are, in order to access these services, you have to have some basic training to go and do them. And that's good for two reasons. One is we're providing our corporate customers with the best of the best. But it also means that we provide a path for the technicians and the independent network professionals in our platform for growth. Kind of like when you're kind of like important enough in the platform and when you've done enough jobs, hey, guess what? A whole new world of new jobs opens up for you, and jobs that have a lot of geographic concentration, which is something that we've realized that's one of the things that they appreciate the most. It's not necessarily how much money you make in each transaction, but it's really, can I fill my day or a big portion of my day by just taking jobs in this platform? And that's where a lot of the value is.
Great. Can you give us some tactical suggestions or things that you learned in terms of developing relationships with the Starbucks, Anheuser-Busch, or even the Stanley Black & Decker organizations?
So I think the most important one is patience. I can't stress that enough. Closing your first B2B deal may take 6 months, it may take a year, and you may go through a number of stages until you reach the right person that will be interested in making that deal. I'll say one specific thing that may sound obvious, but it's not. It's just like, really think about what's on it for them. Don't think about it from your company's perspective and be like, oh, I really want to sell you this service because it's great and it's the best platform ever. And let me take you through 20 slides of, just like my great company presentation. And we have this amazing feature, you won't believe it. And they're tired of that and they don't have time for that. They have day jobs. So really tell them what's in it for them. For us, it is, we'll reduce your maintenance cost by 30%. We'll make sure that you don't have a single day down in your retail location if you use our system and our network. So just think about it, just like people are busy, they have 30 minutes, if they want to see how great you are, they can read it in TechCrunch. Just like really be there for them and think what's in it for them, not only as a company, and that's something it took me a while to learn, but from a career perspective for that particular person. In our case, for example, if you're talking to the head of procurement of a company and you're telling him, oh, you can reduce your workforce by a third and you can get rid of all of your software providers, that's great news for the CFO. That's not necessarily great news for the head of procurement, because he kind of like likes to have a lot of people reporting to him. And to be honest, he doesn't want to go through the process of like letting go, just 5 of their software providers and have to live through a new implementation and things like that. So kind of like tailor your message to not only the company, but the person in particular that you're talking in that company. If you're talking with the CFO, it's all about cost. If you're talking with procurement, it's all about the quality that you'll provide and the fact that whatever you will do will be headache-free. And I think that's very important. It's not the same presentation for the company. It's a presentation kind of like per person that's interested in the company, and always think about it from the point of view from their point of view, and not from kind of like what you want to get out of that meeting.
I think that's brilliant, because sometimes I think companies will do, or the pitch will be one pitch, and it'll be one pitch for everybody, not realizing that you have different priorities for different individuals. That being said, what are some mistakes that you've made in that process of trying to get those clients?
So one was pitching my company to them in the same way in which I will pitch it to an investor. And it's kind of like, oh, just like, we're great. It's like a Harvard Business School graduate and like a top data scientist getting together to solve, the problem of like repairs and maintenance. And they're kind of like, all right, you have no idea what you're talking about. I've been in the maintenance market for 20 years. And then they will just start being like, oh, so, what's the price of, fixing industrial refrigerator? And we will then know, about our platform, our technology. So one of the things, be well prepared in terms of like the industry that you're particularly tackling. And I think that sounds obvious, but many of, I'm sure, entrepreneurs are finding a creative solution in an industry that they're not necessarily experts in. And that's fine, because I think that's how you get many of the ideas, just because you haven't been exposed to the challenges. But make sure you know enough about the industry, about the key metrics that they generally discuss, and incorporate early on in your team someone that really knows about it, and just like have this person go with you to the meetings. I think one of the, I mean, my biggest mistake when starting to deal with B2B partnerships was that it's just like, one, I would pitch as if I were pitching to an investor and talk a lot about our company, our technology, and they had no interest in listening to that. All they wanted to listen is, how will you help me? And two, I was like, if I was able to convince them that the platform is great, then I made a fool of myself by not knowing things that are kind of like the day-to-day of their work. So really think about who you're talking to, how does the day of the person that you're talking to look like, and how you're gonna tailor the message to that person, and who can you bring to the meeting with you that will add to your credibility. And I think being there's an equilibrium. Being, you don't want to be too humble. You don't want to be, I think, being like, well, I have no idea what we're talking about here, but like Joe here is great. It's a great electrician. But at the same time, you want to be humble enough and say, what I bring to the table is the expertise in technology and in process design and in cost reduction, and just like in establishing the right controls for this to work well for you. And I've complemented the team with people that come from the industry and can add a lot of experience, can bring a lot of experience to the table. And the second mistake that I make constantly is I just talk a lot. And it's very important when you go to those meetings, just be like, what are your biggest issues? Kind of like, what keeps you awake at night? And just listen to their needs, because many times you have a hypothesis of how great your product is and how it's going to help everything. But many times what we end up finding is the problems they have, or their biggest problems, are not necessarily what you come to pitch them. They're a little bit different. So you may want to just like keep, just like you want to keep your ears open to that, because there may be great opportunities to your company if you just sit and listen for a little bit. And something I'm learning in life, I will say.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned doing pitches to investors. So let's talk a little bit about raising capital. What are some things that you've learned? And actually, something you just said gave me an idea, which is, what's something maybe that you learned by going through that process, maybe that an investor taught you that was really helpful going forward?
Something of.
So you went in, you probably did a number of pitches trying to get some money. What is something that you learned from listening in those meetings that you didn't already know when you walked in the door? Is there anything that you really gained aside from money from that process?
For sure. I think any feedback you can get from it's very important when you're raising money not to take it personal. Just like the venture capital are doing their job, and they're also going to dozens of companies per day. So just, I think two things that are important is just like, be very attentive to the questions they're asking, because they're not asking them for no reason. Just like they're seeing lots of companies, and probably those questions are actually, even if at the point you're like, I can't believe he asked that was so stupid. If you think about it and you reflect about it, kind of like from a humble perspective, it was an important question, and it's probably based in just like the fact that they've seen a number of companies similar to yours, or they have access to a bunch of metrics. So yeah, definitely kind of like things around unit economics, for example, like repeat purchase. And in our model, we were like, oh, right now our repeat purchase rate is 1.5, but we'll get to 10. And they will ask questions kind of like, well, it's like, are you sure you can get to 10? And it's like, yeah, of course, like stuff breaks all over the house all the time. People need this service. I'm going to provide a great service. And then just like repeat purchase of 10 sounds super reasonable. And then you learn that very advanced platforms in the US are at 2.5 or like 3 purchases per year. And then kind of like, all right, you're like, if a great company with great technology, great data sciences in like a more developed market than the one I operate is at 3, maybe I need to revisit my unit economics. But at the beginning, you start with like a very defensive approach, and that may be okay. But it's important when you leave that meeting, leave your defensive approach and go through every point that they raised. One, because it's very helpful feedback. Two, because whether you like it or not, the next meeting you're going to have, similar points will arise and you want to be better prepared. So just like adapt your pitch based on what you're hearing from investors, and just see, also be open to kind of like, what are things that concern them right now? Kind of like, just be like, how do you see, maybe start the conversation by asking them, like, how do you see the market in general? Are there things that you're particularly interested on? And really do your research on the venture capital that you're talking to before heading there. Is this a venture capital that generally invests in marketplaces or in fintechs? If they do so, which are some of the ones that they've invested in, and kind of like, how are you similar or different to their current investment portfolio? Look at the particular profile of the person that you're going to talk to. If she or him someone that comes from a finance background, and probably they're going to grill you on the numbers, and that's okay, but just be prepared for that. Or are they someone that was an entrepreneur before and they want to see your level of grit there? So I think, again, it's like it is the same company, it is the same service, but just like adapt your pitch and your style depending on who you're talking to.
Awesome. Did you come across any difficulties in terms of raising money for something in Latin America? And maybe you could share some of those.
Oh, for sure.
Please share.
So I think when you raise money in emerging markets, and that's probably true if you're kind of like raising money for companies that are out of New York or San Francisco, but when you're in a different country, it's even more difficult. Is you not only have to explain your product and services, you also have to explain kind of like what's going on with the macro, and try to explain the macro of like many of these countries in Latin America. So they may be like, oh, your idea sounds great, and it sounds like it makes a ton of sense. However, what's going on in Argentina? I heard you cannot, I heard there are 2 exchange rates. How does that work? Or what's going on in Brazil? The currency devaluated 30% in the last 5 months. Just like, are your projections in dollars or in local currency, and so on? So it's kind of like you spend maybe 50% of your time pitching your company, and then 50% of the time kind of like pitching or trying to make sense to the markets in which you operate. And the other challenge with raising money for companies outside of the US is it comes and goes in waves. So generally, when there's a success case, or people hear about a Latin American company, or this may apply in other markets as well, that recently IPO for a couple of $1 billion, then all of the VCs are flying to LATAM and being, oh, what are the next 5 or 10 companies that look like this one? And then it's just like capital is like super available. And I was in situations in which I was kind of like, I had like 5 term sheets in the table, and our numbers were not that great, but just like people were like very excited about the market, and they're kind of like, oh, a US educated person doing something in Latin America, that's all, just like, that's all you need. Don't tell us anything else. And then I was in situations in which the opposite had happened. Maybe a public, a company that was like relevant enough, or where a Silicon Valley investor was investing in Latin America, went bust, and suddenly it's no capital at all, even though you were showing kind of like your best numbers ever. So definitely, it's kind of like the capital comes and goes in waves, regardless of how well your company is doing, and that it's a challenge for sure. And again, it happens in the US as well, but it's much more extreme in markets where there's less liquidity. And then the second thing is just having to explain a lot the market, and sometimes you get off from kind of like what you want to talk about, which is your company and your idea and how great it can be.
Awesome. Well, we have a question that came up from Slido. I'm going to unmute Andrew, and he's going to ask you the question. There you go.
Awesome.
Hey there. Thanks for doing this. My question's about sort of your customer acquisition marketing for B2B, specifically how it shifted from B2C to B2B. And can you explain sort of what your funnel looks like top to bottom? Do you do digital content, social media? Are you paying for PR? Any sort of tips you can tell us would be great. Thank you.
For sure. So for B2B customers, I would say PR is good, but it depends on your category. It will only take you so far. I think it's good to have a couple of articles out there so that if people Google the company and they want to see whether you're real or not, you're out there. Being very tactical, what has worked quite well for us is LinkedIn, just targeting people direct, like looking for people that have particular profiles in LinkedIn and just like reaching out to them directly. So we do not spend a lot of money in Google AdWords nor in Facebook. We did in the past, but what we've realized is, companies, the head of procurement in a company is not generally Googling, just like electricians, kind of like in Sao Paulo. They're kind of like, they already have networks that they work with and large companies that provide them with services. So for us, kind of like a direct contact with the relevant decision maker is much more valuable. So we spend more money thinking about, just like how do we get to this person? How can we get direct introductions to this person and so on? Having said that, that may change depending on what vertical you're working on. Just like so, if you're providing marketing software to optimize the marketing funnel for SMBs or for small companies, I will say Google is a great place to go. But one investor told me this, and I thought it was brilliant, and it was for a previous company. But when we showed our marketing plan and we had our investment in Google, he was like, "I'm not going to invest in your company, but just like seeing how you're spending investors' money, I'm just going to go and buy more Google stock." And I thought so it was mean, but it was also brilliant in the sense, just look at be obsessive about your unit economics and see what pays off the most and what's kind of like your total cost of acquisition for a closed deal. And what we've seen is it is better to have a little bit of more manual intervention or kind of like or targeted conversations with people through that we can target through more professional networks such as LinkedIn, or through industry conventions and things like that. Just like where can you gather a lot of the people that will be interested in your product together, and think about offline too. Again, we're all digital entrepreneurs, but for many verticals, a lot of the decisions are taking offline, and a lot when the people that take these decisions are a little bit more relaxed or have a little bit more time and are not in their day-to-day, that's the best time to target them. So we've also found that kind of like industry conventions or kind of like organizing your own roundtable for a particular set of professionals is something that that works very well. So as entrepreneurs, I like these forums because I get to talk to other entrepreneurs, and that's great for me. Well, that's true also for the head of procurement of a small company, and that's also true for the head of just like accounting of an SMB. So just like think about how can you gather these people in groups and get to them. In our particular case, just traditional online marketing spending has not been a great source of leads for these services.
Andrew has a follow-up. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. About your LinkedIn direct approach, are you finding people that are decision makers at companies and cold outreaching? Do you find that there's a better success in doing it that way versus doing sort of like LinkedIn voicemails or anything like that?
Yeah. So we're constantly testing a number of things. What generally works better if kind of like if someone in the company, and we've sort of like automated this, has, even like a second degree connection to the person. And I think what's very powerful in general is not sending messages that look robotic or that look overly standardized, because people just ignore them. So just, make sure, whether you're doing this in an automated way or not, and it can be automated, just make sure that the messages are more like, hey, Damien, I know that at your company, you may be facing these sort of challenges. We already work with companies such as these and these that are very relevant. We've been able to reduce their costs by 30% or increase their revenues by X%. Like, would love to connect with you, and just make sure that if they reply, you reply to them in 2 minutes. That's the other thing. When a lead comes, the most important thing we've realized is that it's just like the speed at which you reply to that lead is what kind of like, it's a huge indicator of how well the conversations will go, or if you'll get a meeting in person. So that's important. The second thing that we do is, after that initial contact, our next step, and again, we try to create long-term relationships with the companies, and we will have physical people going to these people's offices or locations. So it may be different if you're just selling them a software solution, but we just try to have a meeting in person, whether it's a video conference or a meeting in person. We're not kind of like just like trying to like sell too much to them via email, or like, look at this in our website, or read these 3 success cases. Not because I think that's dumb, but just like we've realized that that's not relevant in our market. They're used to providers going and sitting with them and chatting with them and having a coffee and explaining to them their value proposition. So we just go from kind of like contact to meeting, whether that meeting is virtual or in person. And we sort of like cut off a lot of the things that we did before, which were like, oh, see these like great 5 success cases, or see how other companies work from us, or like a lot of links, or like see what customers are saying about us. What we've realized, again, in particular in our vertical, is just they don't care. They're busy, and it's like, tell me exactly what's in it for me, and then just like, maybe I'll give you a meeting in person, and in that meeting you have to be like very specific about what you go and pitch to them. But I will say, just like I will test, a Facebook campaign, an Instagram campaign, a LinkedIn campaign, a direct reach campaign, a little bit of content, and just see what the numbers say. And I would say follow the numbers more than people's advice. Just like use advice or other people's experience to kind of like increase the number of things that you're gonna test, but then just like live and die by the numbers. I think even if that means that you're getting rid of things in your marketing funnel that you were passionate about, or that you invested a lot of money in, if they're not helping with conversion, they're not helping with conversion.
Awesome. One of the questions from the Slido is, what do or don't you look for in your investors?
That's a great question. What do I look for? Ideally, I look for industry experience. Again, many of us come from just like more generalist backgrounds. And if that's your case, having an investor that knows your space quite well, or that has, whether that's marketplace, that's an industry expertise, or that's kind of like more of a vertical expertise, that's very helpful. If they have resources that they can bring to a table in terms of just like improving your customer acquisition strategy, because they've done a ton of things like that, that's extremely helpful. Second, it's not minor, it's just I look for a kind of like personality match. Some firms are very aggressive, some firms are more founder friendly. Kind of like find a style that works for you, because you're gonna spend a lot of time with your investors. And if things work out great, all investors are gonna be great along the way, but most probably you'll face challenges as your company scale. And it's so much better to face those challenges with people you like and people that you respect. The other thing that I will look for in an investor, if you feel like you'll need more capital in the future, is in general, I would prefer to raise money from investors that I know have deeper pockets in order to participate in other rounds. So, if you have alternatives and you like equally all of the investors that will participate in your seed series, it's great if they have the ability to participate in your A as well, because as you need to raise more money, the fact that your current investors are participating in those rounds along the way, it's super important. And saying my seed investors are not participating in the A because they just don't do A's is a valid answer. But a much better answer is like, oh, all my investors in the seed they want to take their pro rata in the A series or more than their pro rata, and that just adds a lot of credibility to your pitch. What's not as important, what's not as important, and again, in the past I was obsessed by it, but I've realized it's really not that important. Is just like, don't be obsessed with valuation. Just be more obsessed with the terms around it. So kind of like liquidation preferences, just like are a better will give you a better sense of like how they think about the deal than just valuation. Kind of like, how have they behaved in the past with other founders? How have some of the companies in their portfolio performed? So just like once you have alternatives, just do some due diligence in the investors as well, in the same way that they're doing due diligence on yours. Just talk to some people in whose companies they're currently invested, companies that they invested in the past, and just see if they're a good fit for you. And I think that's a personal decision as well. Your company, in a sense, it's a little bit of a reflection of your personality and the sort of things that you want to do. And in a very similar way, different VCs have different DNA, and you ideally want to have a match there. And I don't think there are probably good and bad VCs in terms of performance or personalities, but in general, if you assume that people are well-intentioned, it's just a matter of personal styles and what's going to be more helpful on helping you scale your company. And one last thing I will say in this like personality thing, which I found it's important, it's also what works for you. It's, for example, there are VCs that are very hands-on and very helpful, but you may not want that. You may not want to have to deal with your venture capitals on a weekly basis and have them involved in every single decision that you make from an HR perspective. Or you may, a clear example, for example, is we've raised money from very institutional investors, such as Temasek, which is Singapore's sovereign fund, and that's been amazing for us because we deal with super high quality people that have been very helpful, but they do not provide any day-to-day support for us. And I'm okay with that because we have a lot of other people that do that for us. But we do know that if we need to raise a lot of money in the future, they have plenty of capital, and that the only reason what they invested in us is just so that they can scale that investment. And that's kind of like good for us to know. But if we were hoping for some hand-holding from them, that's not going to happen. Similarly, we had to invest a lot in our legal and accounting and auditing books in order to have such an institutional investor. And that's good, but that also meant that we spent millions of dollars on just getting our books to the level of what a much larger company will generally have. And if you ask me, that money could have been used for other things on the product front, but it was a trade-off, and we were willing to take it at that point.
Great. I'm gonna ask a kind of a funny question, but you may be familiar with Colin Jost from Saturday Night Live. They always drop the thing that he's from Harvard. How valuable is having the HBS part of your LinkedIn profile in terms of network and raising capital and advising, et cetera?
It is, I would say it's actually quite helpful, in particular if you're raising money, for example, in Latin America, because it just gives potential investors a sense of, oh, it's like a Harvard Business School graduate or Stanford Business School graduate or whatever it is, but just like it gives them a sense of, oh, okay, you've even if you haven't done much, it's like, oh, you've done something, or I can, connect you with kind of like people that I can relate to. I think the same thing will happen if you worked at Google for a couple of years or at McKinsey for a couple of years or at Facebook. They not necessarily are going to be asking what in Google you were specifically doing and stuff, but it's kind of like just the fact that you pass that filter, I think gives people some level of comfort. But by no means it's a predictor of the performance of your company, but I think it helps for that with that initial, to get that initial meeting or to get that kind of like basic level of trust established. Not that it cannot be established in other ways, but kind of like, oh, I'll introduce you to Matias. He's an Argentine guy, lived all over Latin America. He's a Harvard Business School graduate, or he's an EIR, and that kind of like, it's like, oh, all right. It's just like, now I have a name for this person. But that can also be just like, meet Damien. He worked with a bunch of startups in New York, and he did a lot of recruitment for them. He's just great. But just like, what are kind of like the two very quick things that they can say about you when introducing you that gives you a little bit of credibility? Again, and I think that's good for that initial meeting, and that's it. And then it's up to you.
Yeah, no, that's good. There's a question that popped up within Slido. It asks, do you have advice for early stage marketplaces trying to grow both sides? How did you manage and grow supply and demand in the early days?
Okay. So I'll give you the formal answer, and then I'll give you tactically what we did. So the formal answer, and it is true, is you have to grow both sides of the marketplace at the same time. You really can. Some people will be like, it's all about supply, or some people are going to be, it's all about demand, and there are truths for every one of those arguments. The reality is, if you're building a marketplace, I think having curated supply is super important, because that's the experience that you're giving to the customers. At the same time, the best way to have curated supply is to give them demand. Just like what people want is like more jobs or more income for them. So what we did very tactically, or if you're starting a marketplace and you want to test it, is maybe find whatever it's necessary in the particular marketplace that you're doing, but a small number of service providers. In our case, we started with 10 that I recruited myself over the phone, and just guarantee to them some basic level of income. And that's not ideal long term. This is just do it if you're doing it very early stage, because if not, you're gonna end up in a situation in which you're kind of like having terrible unit economics and then being like, oh, I'm just going to take the subsidies later on and everything's going to be fine. And that's not the case. But I feel it's fair to do it for the first, just like, again, 5, 10, 15, 100 suppliers, and just guarantee to them some basic level of income so that they're engaged in your platform and they're going to kind of like respond fast to the demand requests, and then start getting some demand and proving to these suppliers that you can get to the level of utilization that you promised to them. So at the beginning, you're guaranteeing some of this income, but then this income should come from kind of like the demand that you're generating. And once you start generating that dynamic, then, all right, generate 2% more supply, get one more supplier, and then you start kind of like scaling both at the same time. But to get the ball moving, I will say just get a handful of great suppliers that will provide an amazing customer experience to your demand.
Great. We actually have a follow-up to my HBS question. What advice can you give to people that don't have an HBS or a Google or a McKinsey or anything in their background in terms of raising capital?
So the first thing I will say is that I feel like if I were investing, I will say just like come with one slide to your presentation, which is customer acquisition cost versus proven lifetime value of your users. So again, the most important thing is to have a great company, not kind of like where you went to school. Most of some of the smartest people out there, they don't even go to college, and some of the most successful people out there are college dropouts. So that's not necessarily a filter to get money, but being very tactical, just like try to get something out there, whether it's kind of like, a data science, Harvard X or MIT X, or, just like analytics course, or try to get something out there that can give like quick data points to people to assess like the fact that you've done kind of like interesting things, or that you're like intellectually curious. And again, that's not like, oh, I've traveled to like 50 countries or things like that. I think, you know, again, that was exciting when you were 18 or maybe 30 years ago when like world traveling was not as accessible. But there's some good, you know, like, are you starting a marketplace for restaurants and you worked as a server in a restaurant for a couple of years while you were in school? That's actually more relevant than having gone to like Harvard Business School.
Right.
If you're starting a marketplace for restaurants. So kind of like, what gives you, what Harvard gives you or other big schools or Google is a general validation, but I think a specific validation many times is much more powerful. So if you were starting Iguanafix and you will have been like, oh, I worked for 5 years as an electrician doing maintenance for retail customers, and I realized there was this huge need, so I kind of like met up with like a friend of mine that's a developer, and we built this platform. That gets you a ton of credibility. So I think just like look for credibility points specific to your pitch. They don't have to be general. Again, if you have a data science startup, then maybe do a couple of like online courses and things like that, just also to show that you have enough interest and some validation. But then kind of like, you know, any experience that's relevant in your field and hands-on experience, I think it's kind of like the best experience that you can have.
Great. Now, Brian's going to ask a question in just a moment. Brian, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Thank you, guys. So I have a question. So I'm in a very similar space, and I bounce back and forth between this question myself, which is, how valuable have you found it to be to talk to your B2B clients about the improvements that your platform brings to their supply chain, which ultimately is designed to improve their unit economics?
So I think that's your best pitch. Basically, don't talk too much about what the features of your platform per se, but more kind of like what your platform can do for them. So, you know, if you provide software, for example, to improve their supply chain, just be like, this platform will allow you to reduce costs by around 30%. And these are the 4 specific features that I know you need that will get you there. What's been very powerful to us, and I don't know if that's a possibility in your business, is just like, maybe tell them, let's do a small pilot. You know, just like, you don't have to tell me that you're gonna use me for everything, but maybe could you use our software in one particular location or in one particular plant, or kind of like, can we run in parallel, you know, your process and your process using my software for a month and see what results we get out there? So kind of like, just put your money where your word is, and just be like, you know, I would love to be able to show this in real life. And again, if your software is very complex or requires a ton of integrations from your end, that may not be possible. But to the extent that it is possible to run kind of like a dry test and a pilot, that is very powerful. But to your specific question, I would say, just make it all about them. Make it about how their supply chain is going to be better using their software, and not too much about how you build the best software ever, because they're not that interested in you. You know, they're just like trying to do their work better or cheaper.
Great. Brian has a follow-up.
Yeah, so that makes a whole bunch of sense. And in New York, I'm in the same marketplace dealing with contractors and property and commercial property managers. And the hardest thing that I found is being able to get access to those kinds of vendors, because there's difference between the standard general contractor and the kind of that these B2B clients will interact with. So what have you found to be successful in talking with the B2B clients that you have with getting access to their vendors?
So, sorry, just to clarify, you're asking the contractors to give you access to their own vendors?
No, so like in my specific case, the client or the B2B that I'm pitching to is the property management company, and they usually have a curated list of vendors already, depending on their scale. What have you found to be successful in talking with those particular clients, your particular clients, about who their vendors are, like what contractors they use at the B2B level?
Yeah, in general, they tend to be extremely jealous of their network of contractors, because that's a lot of the value that the property managers bring to a table, and they've spent years curating and building relationships with those vendors. So I think it will be extremely hard for you to get access to them. In our case, what we're doing is just like we're sort of like competing with some of these vendors. So what we try to tell them is we'll be cheaper or we'll provide higher quality than these vendors. You should try us out. If you are asking them to open their vendor list to you, you just need to like think hard about what's in there for them. What are they going to gain from giving you access to that? Again, think about it not from the perspective where you want to get, but kind of like how are you going to benefit them, and you need to make that super clear to them in order to guarantee that they will open up their vendor list, because it's not a minor thing for them. It's just kind of like a lot of their value is just on having that curated vendor list.
All right, that's good. So we're about to wrap up this part of today. We're going to be going into our karma in just a few moments. So if you have a give or an ask that you want to share with the group, again, remember when we do karma, no service providers. These should be authentic gives or asks, things that can truly either help you or help others. So think about that for a moment, and we'll come right back to karma. My last question for you is, where are some good resources, some good sources of information, things that you listen to, things that you watch, people that you read or follow, that have really informed you and have helped you be a better founder, CEO, etc.?
Okay, so one thing that I think not many people do, and it's very helpful, is we all read a lot of like great books by great entrepreneurs. Kind of like one particular book I like is the Hard Things About Hard Things. And I don't know if you guys have read it, from Ben Horowitz, and it's just like I was reading it with my co-founder, and I was just like every single thing I was just like, oh, okay, we all go through this. But I would say, just to not give you a list of books that you've probably all read, is one is spend a day a week, just like, or a morning working in customer service in your company, and just listen to your customers. Don't just get kind of like the report of like 99% satisfaction. You may want to go through a phone and listen to that 1% of people that don't like your product and service, and you just may want to be in direct contact with them. So spend time in the ground. I can't stress that enough. It's like many times we pride ourselves on being like very smart and read all of these amazing entrepreneurs, but it's like a lot of the truth is out there in the street, and your customers have a lot of the truth. So spend time going to commercial meetings and learning from your clients. Spend time in customer service and listen to the complaints of your customers and address them yourself, because again, it's like you learn more and more that people stay with brands for customer service and not necessarily because of your great technology. And also get yourself, even if you're not comfortable with selling, get yourself out there with some of your salespeople, or participate in sales call or do sales yourself too, because it will make it like very crystal clear the need to have a very refined pitch, and make sure that you know really what you're bringing to the table as a startup. So those two, just like again, read interesting things from super smart people, and you all know who those are. But I would say your customers and your suppliers are also smart people that know a lot about your space. Spend time listening to them. And then I would say, just like everyone's talking too about mindfulness and things like that. But I feel like if you're an entrepreneur and, just like with everything going on now, it's hard times, and just being mentally stable and making sure that you're not taking decisions on, kind of like on the go, and that you're kind of like a good, sane person for your team is super important. So also take the time to read some things just for pure enjoyment, just like read things that are not related to businesses per se.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for spending time with us. And we always give our guest the first opportunity to add some karma. So if there's a thing that you need that maybe somebody in the audience can provide, or if there's a give that you would like to offer up, you have the floor.
So the give, I will say, if any of you guys listening to these are thinking about building marketplaces and I can be helpful, more than happy to jump on the phone on a one-on-one and do a quick run through your business models and give you my 2 cents in how I see them. So more than happy to do that. That's something I feel comfortable with. And before starting Iguana-Fix and in the process of growing Iguana-Fix, I spend a lot of time thinking about marketplaces, both in B2C and B2B. And in terms of asks, I'm trying to understand better the real estate market in the US, in particular commercial real estate. Not so much in terms of like maintenance, but more kind of like just looking at value of property per se. So if there's anyone that's an expert in commercial real estate and has looked at the market and has some thoughts, would love to meet up and talk about it.
Awesome. That is like the perfect model give and ask. I appreciate it. I will follow up. I don't see any hands yet, but if you have a give or ask, please raise your hand in the chat or somewhere. My give is, and I mentioned this previously, I've been toying around with a platform called Powtoon. It's a 2D animation platform, and I think I'm getting better at it. So if you want to do anything in the 2D animation space, I could certainly give you some help. My ask is, in a few weeks, we're going to be doing some mock interviews. Aaron's been one of my interviewers before for high school students and college students that need some interview help. So connect with me if you'd like to be an interviewer. It's fun and it's quick. Aaron's giving the thumbs up, so that's appreciated. Dan, go ahead, unmute yourself and share your give or ask.
Thank you. That was a really, wonderful, generous, and honest hour. I really appreciate it. So my ask is, this is the first week of my MVP marketplace. And I would love to invite people to go, take a look and let me know what they think. It's called Bookyaya. I'll put it in the chat, BOOKYAYA.com. And my give is, the marketplace is a form of entertainment, which is particularly useful during the quarantine, because it's live appearances with your favorite authors, so that's basically it. We have a great event on Monday night with a New York Times bestselling author who is at the center of the Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump. He's got a book out right now that's on fire called Dark Towers. So enjoy it, and it's an inexpensive ticket.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan.
Oh, and one last thing, I wanted to thank you, because believe it or not, Founders Friday has had a prominent role in my getting to MVP, hugely prominent. Aaron.
That's awesome. We love to hear that.
Thank you.
Very cool. And I'm just going to jump around. Dia Simone.
Hello, everyone. So I'm deep conditioning. That's why I'm not on here. I was here last week. So my name is Nadia. I'm the founder of Black Vita Media, and we amplify Afro-Latinx and Caribbean stories. I'm currently living in DR, and my give is for like any parents out there. if there are like, I know like tutoring your kid has been really hard right now. So I'm donating like 2 to 3 hours to like a kid in need. Well, not in need, like I guess we're not like really like in need, but yeah, like English, science, or even if like it's like maybe babysitting just to get your kid out of your space for a few hours to do some work. I'm down for that. I work with children. I'm very likable, you know, so there's that. So I'm donating that. And for my ask, like I really need help with the approach to angel investors and like privately wealthy individuals. Like I have access to these people, but the approach, it's like, how do I ask them for money without turning them off and messing it up? So I have access to them. I know there's interest for what I'm doing, but it's like, how do I ask? How do I approach? That's my issue. So that's me, and I guess I'll just leave my email in the comments.
Great. That's exactly what I was going to suggest. Yeah, any of your contact information that you want to share with the group, please put it into the chat along with the website if you have it for what you're working on. We're going to go to Ageani. Kay?
Hey guys, Kay Agajani here.
Agajani, sorry.
No, you're all good. So I've been here a few times before, love Founders Friday. So I'm ex-VC, so I spend a lot of time with early stage founders and first-time fund managers who are trying to figure out VC fundraising. And my give is to do a pitch deck review for you or sit down for a chat if you have questions about VC. So Simone, happy to chat about angel investing and how to talk to them. My ask is if you know any founders who are kind of like really ramping up and need help fundraising or on business strategy, please send them my way. I'll have my email in the comments.
Awesome, thank you. All right, up next, Terry.
Hi. Sorry. Hi, my name is Terry, and I'm the founder of an organization called the Engendered Collective, and it's a platform for survivors of domestic and gender-based violence to come together in community learning and advocacy. So my ask is that and one of the components of the platform is a weekly podcast, and my ask is that everyone listen to my most recent episode, which launched yesterday, which actually connects the behaviors of sexist and misogynistic men and climate change denial, which is very relevant to what's happening right now. And my give is I also have a feminist consulting business where I work with organizations and individuals to help build inclusive, equitable, and transparent cultures. So I'd like to offer 1 free hour of coaching to help you think that through. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Tim, do you want to do a give or ask, or are you just liking the name?
Which Tim? Me?
Siwula.
Oh
yeah.
yeah, sorry, yeah. Yeah, hey, yeah, if anybody has any technical questions about their product or design decisions with like cloud infrastructure, architecture, or things you might want to consider, I'm happy to help you. Just shoot me an email. Drop my email in the chat.
All right, thanks, Tim. Go ahead, Philip.
Hi all, good morning. Hope everybody's keeping safe. So my name is Philip. I was previously a founder at a company called Smart Asset. So my give is if anybody needs any help with finding technical co-founders, how to evaluate technical people, or even just dealing with angels and VCs all the way from angel to like Series C, Series D, happy to help out. And at the moment, I'm launching a new, well, it's been a project for a while. It's called Founders List. It's a platform for connecting founders. Right now, there's about 2,000 users. One of the most active sections is finding co-founders. I'll put the link in the message chat. But one of the things we're building out now is a way for founders to connect and network with each other. So if anybody is interested, I'd love to show you the demo, get your thoughts on whether mentoring or just advising for an hour a week might be of interest to you. I'll put the links and my email in the chat.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Jake, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me good? Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, so I'm Jump Growth Jake. Work for the company Jump Growth. We are a software development agency, and I can give free consultations on your tech stack, helping you with the development process, getting to an MVP, etc. My ask today is because I have started, along with some partners, a cachaça brand. Cachaça comes from Brazil. This is liquor that is fermented from sugarcane juice as opposed to sugarcane molasses like rum is. It's made well with a few things, but it's used in caipirinhas. So if you're familiar with that, and if you would like to try it out, I'll leave a link here for you to sign up for our email list, and we'll send you some of the cases if you order them via D2C, and you can have some for your happy hours. Yeah, so looking forward to that. Just look into the chat and I'll leave that information.
Thanks, Jake.
Sure.
Andrew, you're up.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm the founder of a company called Grapevine AI. We are a voice-activated relationship insights platform using voice tech and AI to help people build authentic relationships. We're about to launch beta. We have over 1,000 people there, but I'd love to get you guys on it. That's my ask. My give is cumulatively between this startup and my previous two, I've raised over 7.5 million. I have a VC list of 1,200 plus that I created myself. If you have trouble, want deck reviews or introductions to any VCs that I know of, or a list that fits your criteria, shoot me a note. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Let's see. Anybody else that would like? Anybody else want to do karma? Raise your hand or put a note in the chat. And I'm looking. I see, nope, I don't see any hands. Okay. All right, so what we're gonna do now, if there's no more karma. Oh, Four, you wanna say? Go ahead.
Hi, folks, great to be here. Matias, thank you very much. A give, I'll put an ask in the chat, but the give is I'm a product coach, innovation advisor, so I'm glad to talk to anybody about customer discovery, UX with Agile, UX, look at your stuff, roadmap, whatever. Founders Friday, people are go to the top of the list. So my LinkedIn is in the chat. Let me know what you need. Thanks. Take care, everybody. Be safe.
Awesome. We will leave this open for a little bit longer if people want to just chat. Otherwise, we will say, give a big virtual applause. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You were great. And hopefully, people listened and they learned and they will do something with the information that you provided, and wish you the best of luck and with everything.
Thank you so much. And it was great talking with all of you guys. Thank you for giving me the space. I appreciate it.
All right. Good stuff.
Thank
all right,
you.
Founder
Bye.
Friday, everybody. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. So I'm just responding to people in the chat. If you didn't post your information, contact information, please do. All right, everybody, take care. I'm gonna leave it open for a little bit longer. I'm just gonna mute myself.
Well, everyone, take care. Be safe. Thanks again.